What's up, guys? For those of you who don't know me, my name is Wes. For those of you who do, what's up? Hope everybody's doing well and staying healthy. So today I wanted to go on another field trip, and today I want to go somewhere very special, but first we gotta get to school. Here we are. Daniel Spectrum. Of course we can't go in, but today I want to take you guys to Berlin. Here we are. Okay, so Berlin is super cool, and I wanted to talk about the electronic music scene, the techno music scene in Berlin. But when I was researching it, I realized that in order to do this, in order to figure out why the scene is so awesome in Berlin, we kind of have to talk about the history of Berlin. So, really quickly, Berlin is in Germany, and you'll see where we are. We're back over here. So we cross the Atlantic Ocean to get to Berlin. So Berlin is in Germany, and Germany was in the Second World War, and they lost. And they lost to the Allies, which were a lot of different countries, but some of the major players were England, France, the United States, and the Soviet Union. So after the war was over, those four countries were occupying Berlin. Berlin was one of the last places to fall, and those four countries were essentially rebuilding it. And so let me just get this map. Oh yeah, here we are. So this is what Berlin looked like at that time. So we got the French, the British, the Americans, and the Soviet Union. And this worked okay for a little while. The war ended in 1945, but then in 1947, things started to get pretty tense between the Americans and the Soviet Union. And this was the beginning of the Cold War. Now, the Cold War was basically this war that never happened. So all this was happening in Berlin, and they're so close to each other here. So if we go check out the map of Germany here, East Germany was governed by the Soviet Union, and East Berlin here, and then West Germany was by the other Allied countries that I'd mentioned, including America, and they were also occupying West Berlin. So East Germany, East Germany was governed by the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union was a communist country, which means that you work a certain amount and you get paid the same amount no matter what. Everyone gets paid the same amount. Everyone gets the same amount of food, no matter how hard you work. And the opposite is capitalism. So, which just mean that if you work really hard, you could make a lot more money. And so that's what was going on in West Berlin. So a lot of East Berliners saw a lot of the prosperity in West Berlin, and they would just leave. A lot of people left East Berlin, which was called defecting from the communist country, and they would just move to West Berlin. So about 2.5 million people left East Berlin. And this was really starting to mess with the economy of the Soviet Union, and they were getting very upset. So they did this thing, they built the Berlin Wall. So they built this giant big wall around West Berlin. Here are some pictures of it. And they didn't tell anyone they were going to do it, and they just built it all of a sudden. And the Berlin Wall stayed up for a long time until it finally came down in 1989. And at that time, the Cold War had ended. I guess 1991 it had officially ended, but at that time, things were chilling out. The wall came down, and Berlin was ready to party. But when the wall came down, and along with that, the Soviet Union dissolved, and it was no longer the Soviet Union, and went back to being mostly Russia and a number of other countries. And Berlin was its own city again, and Germany was its own country again. And so the German kids were ready to party. Everyone was ready to party, and a whole bunch of people left East Berlin here because there was a lot of Soviet army bases, and a lot of people who had lived there who just weren't allowed to leave were finally allowed to leave. So tons of people left, and there were tons of abandoned buildings, tons of these giant, huge buildings, and people gutted them. People took everything that they could sell from them. And so there are these big, empty, abandoned buildings. And then these kids just wanted to party there. And I'll play this little clip of when the wall came down so you could kind of get a vibe for the atmosphere there.
It has been an astonishing day. Hour after hour, all through today, thousands and thousands of West Germans have come to the wall to see for themselves, to climb up on this hideous structure, to finally look down at what has been no man's land for so long. Finally, after all these years, to say in person what they think of the East German border guards, or try to make friends.
So, as you can see, the kids are stoked. Like it's time to party. This giant thing has happened. The wall is down, and Berlin has this new identity. And there's all these abandoned buildings. And the other thing that was happening was the cops were really not paying attention to where the kids were partying. That really wasn't their main problem at the time. They were trying to rebuild this city and figure out how it was going to work now that East and West Berlin were together. So these kids just had free reign to go again to these abandoned buildings and just throw giant parties. And so these were some of the first raves that happened in Berlin. And a rave is a party with usually electronic music in these kinds of buildings. So the music that they would play sounded kind of like this. It was crazy. People would, put up a couple of lights and bring a sound system, and everyone would dance. So this music became really big in Berlin, but it actually comes from Detroit. So we're going to go there, and we're going to talk about the history of how this music came about, and then we're going to come back to Berlin, and we're going to talk about how it's grown and where that music is at these days.